Hi, welcome to Bookmark. I'm your host, Don Noble. Today's guest is the writer Daniel Wallace. Wallace is best known, surely, for his novel Big Fish, but lately his writing has gone in a new direction. He has just published This Isn't Going to End Well, a book about his most unusual brother-in-law, and at the same time, a kind of memoir. I spoke with Daniel Wallace in Studio UA in the Digital Media Center on the campus of the University of Alabama. Daniel, it is really nice to see you again.
So good to see you.
You and I have done this before. You keep writing books. We keep sitting down and talking about them.
Yeah.
But today is special in a different way. Tonight, you are going to be inducted into the Alabama Writers Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
This is like an early morning dumb television show question, but how do you feel about that? What are your feelings about that? Can you say?
Well, it's surprising on a number of levels because you don't start out writing thinking of anything like that at all. You're just writing books, writing stories, learning how to write a sentence. And you can't really logically move from a sentence to the recognition that this entails. So it's, in a way, it's like beyond imagining, because I would never have allowed myself to imagine anything like this. And surely, it's the only place that anything like this could ever happen, because all of my work takes place in Alabama, even though I've lived away from Alabama for most of my life.
Well, you, in your own modesty, may not have imagined it. I know lots of writers who begin to imagine it practically from the start.
Oh, really?
The prizes they're going to get. They're going to get.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your career, as we've all read and watched, Big Fish, lots of other novels, and then a turn with a children's book, a very, very funny, nice children's book, The Cat's Pajamas, but now a book of nonfiction. I have in my copy many question marks. Memoir, biography, character study, this book of nonfiction. This Isn't Going to End Well, which is, by the way, a wonderful title.
Thank you.
What is it? How you describe it to people? It's his story, it's your story, it's the family story. What is it?
There are a lot of things going on, you're right, in this book, and it's really the product of somebody who doesn't know how to write this kind of book. I've never written a book of nonfiction before, never written certainly a memoir before, never had any desire to write a memoir. And in fact, the word memoir is not on the book.
No.
Yeah, and because I don't want to think of it like that. But it's my story told through William or my brother-in-law, or it's William's story told through me, which I guess is closer to the truth. But I think it's all of those things. I think it's a coming-of-age story, it's a memoir, a biography. It's also true crime. There are true crime aspects to it as well.
Yes, and as any good book should have, your book has a wonderful opening scene. If it were a novel, it would still be a wonderful opening scene.
Yeah.
William on the roof.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, it's a great scene and has the benefit of being true.
Yeah.
If it weren't, I guess I could make it up. But the first scene of the book is the first time that I see him, and I am at the back door in the kitchen of our house and can see the pool and the roof of my parents' bedroom, and he's on the roof. and he's just a spectacular looking guy. You know, I'm 12,
Yeah.
just like this little weed of a boy, and he's a man, you know, a young man, but a man, and
How old was he?
he
When you were
was
12?
18.
Uh-huh.
So he was, you know, 18, the apex of, you know,
Yeah.
of life in a way, and you know, in that energy and eagerness and bravery, and I watched him as he did this thing that I thought was impossible, which was to jump off that roof and into the pool below without killing himself.
He missed the cement. He missed the shallow end.
Yeah, he made it happen.
And then as I was reading along, the next few paragraphs later, it said, he did it over and over. And he got other people to do it as well.
Yeah.
So you had this little cavalcade of teenagers jumping off your roof.
Yeah,
Well,
and quite an invitation into what could be, you know, in my life.
the reason, well, I mean, he was your brother-in-law. He married your sister, and they stayed married a good long time. They were a good couple. But he captured your imagination. Describe William as you have done. I mean, at one point, I think he is even describing himself, all the things that he's interested in, that he does and does well, to someone who never heard of him. What was William about? What did he do?
Well, he was William before he became William, and eventually he became famous for being William, or the William that he
William Neely. we
William
should say.
Neely, yeah.
Yeah.
William Neely, who became an iconic cartographer and cartoonist and humorist, but that wasn't, in the beginning, that wasn't what was as important to me as this idea of William Neely, this James Dean, Clint Eastwood kind of Hemingway-esque character who was strong and silent, on the side of the angels mostly, but not afraid, getting into trouble, got into a lot of trouble, but still always the guy you would want on your side. And his example, his presence in my life from that day forward was, what it allowed me to do was imagine a different kind of life than the one that I had been presented with. A great life, to work for my father, go to business school eventually, and whatever follows, whatever would have followed. But not having any other opportunity to see anything different, possibly different, he was an example that said, well, there are other things you could be in the world.
And the things that he did, and he published 10 books, as I think.
Yeah.
And maybe the one that he was, the skill or the expertise he was best known for might have been kayaking down wild rivers. But what are some of the other things that he did and wrote about?
Well, of the books that he published a book on mountain biking, a bunch on kayaking. He did one on skating. He illustrated. He'd had 2 or 3 books on just his cartoons, because he was a R. Crumb inspired cartoonist, and he did a lot of books that he had on the burner when he died that he never finished, like how to climb trees. He used to spend the night at the top of an oak tree, strapped himself in, and was writing a book on how to live in trees. He writing a book on how to tie knots.
And the title of that was something
it's like
clever.
Be not afraid, or something like that, or fear not. Fear not. So he had all this experience in all these different realms. He could build anything. He could fix anything. He loved animals. He kept copperheads as snakes. It was just a very wide-ranging interest and a desire to know everything about the world.
Enormously capable, apparently. He built his own house, and so on. And Holly, your sister, I guess I'm unclear about her ailment. She had a chronic ailment, and William was her caregiver for decades.
Yeah, yeah. So she woke up one morning when she was 21, ossified. She couldn't move.
Oh,
And it turned out to be rheumatoid arthritis.
oh,
And this affects the lining around all your joints and destroys them, and destroys eventually your entire body. So she, at 21, she had rheumatoid arthritis, and it was before there was any kind of cure or any way to stop it or to slow it down. And so her body just started to disintegrate over the next 2 and 3 decades.
which decades?
So she got it, I think, in 1978, and then died eventually in 2011, 10 years after William died.
Yes.
Yeah. And though there were other things, it was an really autoimmune disease, which entailed other diseases that went along with it. And she had diabetes and Raynaud's and just a long, long list of ailments.
And he was, for a long time, an absolutely faithful companion nurse, caregiver.
Right. He kept her
Absolutely.
alive, and she kept him alive. They kept each other literally alive because of what each needed to do for the other's existence.
Yes. Well, the title of your book does give some things away. It's funny in its own way, but then again, it's sort of not.
Yeah.
William develops obsessions for, well, if you're feeling happy, they're interests and activities to conquer. But one of them struck me as, in a sense, an obsession, and that was, let's see, his friend
Edgar
wait a minute, Edgar dies,
Hitchcock, yeah.
and William thinks Stanley Bird was the murderer, and he becomes a one-man investigation.
Yeah, he becomes the leader of an investigation, bringing in other people in Birmingham to help him. But yeah, he's the ringleader of an investigation, a parallel investigation to the police investigation.
Right. What made William think that this fellow he knew was a murderer?
There were actually a lot of reasons why you would think that he was the murderer. He had worked with Edgar and other drug deals before. He had a key to Edgar's apartment. There were some things missing from his apartment. There were days had passed between the time that Edgar was killed and it was discovered that he was killed. He was the first person to raise the alarm that Edgar was killed. He knew too much about what happened to Edgar, and there's a long list of that William kept of the reasons why he was indeed the murderer, and in fact took his proof to the police and had him arrested and charged with murder.
Yes. Finally, though, it was all circumstantial.
Yes, it was all circumstantial. Most murder convictions are circumstantial, but I think more than that, though, there was this. The prosecutors kept leaving, quitting, going on to other positions, and a new prosecutor comes on, and the last thing that they want to do is take on a difficult case, right? Especially when drug dealers are a part of it.
All right. As I was reading along, it was very clear to me that William was obsessed with this investigation.
Yeah.
What began to creep into my reader's mind was Daniel is becoming obsessed with this very same issue. And you took up, in a sense, much later, where William left off. Did you do some investigating? What'd you do?
Yeah. Well, I was a terrible, terrible investigator, by the way. I mean, my goal, I think, starting out was to take this story and this investigation to its end and to find out what really happened. I wanted to talk to Stanley. I got in touch with him, or tried to get in touch with him. He never returned my calls, or I hired a private detective, to find him, and did. And but again, I mean, I understand why he wouldn't want to talk, but because he was accused of murder, right? And that's not anything that ever goes away.
Oh, I was surprised that to read. Is Stanley dead too?
No. He's the only person that's still alive.
I thought this guy's going to pop up and sue everybody.
Oh, why? Well, everything that's in the book is in the newspaper.
Oh, right.
There's nothing that's not. There's nothing that I invent. In fact, and I do come to a certain point in the book and say, I think he's innocent. My feeling was that he was innocent. That
Is
he
that
didn't
right?
do it. Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. I would not have said that a minute ago. I would not.
Yeah.
My feeling when I left the book was that you thought, as William had thought, all right, the subject of this book, hinted at in the title, is William's demise. William finally commits suicide, and absolutely one of the best pages in the book is you're angry at him. One, because he committed suicide, and two, because he abandoned your sister. Fair enough?
Yeah.
The book is in a sense a study of depression. What do you know? What do you know you didn't know before?
Well, it's about, I think, grief and compassion, depression, his depression specifically, and a man who'd had suicidal ideation for most of his life, is one that I felt like, as I read his journals, and again, I would not have written this book had I not found, many years after he died, his journals, which opened up a whole new part of him to me.
Yeah.
So a part of him that I didn't know existed. And so reading the journals, I was able to see the context of of his life, the way he felt about being alive, and how he never felt a part of the world, and how he was actually able to stay alive in spite of that for so many years. That to me was the most interesting part, is that how he was able to get strength from different sources that were not within him, but were outside of him.
One comes away thinking that the kayaking and the mountain biking and the rock climbing and all of it is a way for him to be focused out there and not be looking in.
Absolutely.
For 25 years?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the journals that you cite, he's a relatively young man, and he's talking about how he's going to kill himself. And he thought about it daily?
I think every day he had to decide whether he was going to live or die. I don't think that he would have died by suicide on any given day necessarily, but more so than most of us, he would have to make that decision.
And in a world where we throw around the word around bipolar all the time, he was not. He was unipolar.
Yeah, and
he was depressed.
He was bisected too. I mean, there were two of him, and neither was more real than the other. I think people believe that when you discover, say, secret journals, in which you discover somebody isn't who they pretend to be, that is the true self, and the other pretend self is not real. Both of his selves were equally real. The interior and the exterior were both equally important. Don't want to give too much extra weight to the emotional interior life and ignore the exterior acting life, because that's what we are. We're actors, right? I mean,
Well,
acting.
we do things. We
Mhm,
move
we do
around in the
things.
world. We
Yeah.
do things, and we are measured
By what we
mostly
do. Yeah.
by what we do, or we're in the palaver business
Yeah.
by what we say
Right.
out in public. It was odd to think of all that hyperactive life, though, as in a sense his self-medication, his treatment of himself so that he didn't commit suicide.
Yeah.
That is great. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it's not something that we all do to one degree or another. And I think that the story of William is not unique. I just think that his is articulated in a way that makes it much more clear.
And that's exactly where I was thinking about going next. You've written the story. People may read it. And what is your hope? I mean, you've made a study of a man's depression, in a sense. You hope the reader does what? You hope the reader learns what?
Well, I don't come into a book hoping to teach anybody anything.
Well,
I
book's
don't.
finished, though. You can say now.
Yeah. I do look back on the book and see it as being can be a very valuable text for others who are either living this way or know people who are. This sense of, to me, I feel like that people who do have suicidal ideation or who are thinking about dying by suicide keep that secret, and the longer they keep it, much more powerful it becomes, and the less likely they are to share it. So I think that's what happened with William. He kept it so long that eventually it overwhelmed everything, and people reading this can see that in themselves or in people that they know and love.
David Brooks recently published an article in the column in the Times about a friend of his who committed suicide. And David Brooks's conclusion, he tried to be the best friend imaginable to the depressed person. And one of the things that Brooks did for his friend in conversation was, your wife loves you, your children love you, you have a wonderful life, you have a wonderful career. It all doesn't matter. In this case, William's achievements, his fame, his success, does anything matter? Or does depression just trump everything?
Yeah. I think depression does a really good job of feeding itself. You know, and you look for the things that contribute to the depression, not for the things that are going to make it better. You believe in it. I mean, you don't want to deny it after a while, because if you do, you undermine everything that you believe. You know, if you say no to the depression, it kind of undermines who you've been all this time, right? If you've ever had a fight with your wife and you keep the fight going for another day, even though you know you're wrong, because you don't want to admit it, it's that times a billion, I think. And I definitely understand that. I mean, in my own life, I discount success and
Yes,
and
I think of it as your modesty. I do.
Well, I look at errors, as being more important than the times I don't screw up. And I think that he did that quite a bit.
Well, you've had bestsellers, you've had books that didn't do as well. This book is going to have an odd audience, but I have an encouraging anecdote for you.
Okay.
This is name dropping of the first order, but I was interviewing William Styron, and he had some mega hits, and he had written this book about his depression, Darkness Visible, which I'll bet you're familiar with. Anyway, I said to Mr. Styron, I said that book turned out to be very useful. I said, but I don't imagine it sold much, and he became giggly, hysterical. He said, whoa, it sold like crazy. It's a required text at every nursing school in America. Well, we can hope for the best here.
Well, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who reads this and how they respond to it. I'm really interested in it.
Yeah, yes, exactly. He didn't know that was going to happen.
Oh, no.
No, he thought he was getting his story, his internal
Yeah.
story of his alcoholic depression out.
Right. Yeah, it's terrible, terrible depression. Yeah.
But he was writing it from the inside. You're writing it, in a sense, from the outside. And now you'll go on and write something else.
I guess so. I guess I have to.
Well, people do expect
What's in it for me? That's what
expect it of you.
Yeah, what's in it for me?
Don't know.
Yeah.
I'll read it.
Yeah, you'll read it?
If you do a good job on the next
Yeah.
book, you could have another television
but
show.
the problem is that you have to read it no matter what.
You were going to go back to writing fiction, more
I will
stories.
do
What?
stories, I think, fiction. I'd love to do nonfiction too. I don't have any other nonfiction stories to write now. I don't see myself writing another book like this, but it was a really interesting process, and I'd like to do something in that line again if I can.
I would read a book called My 3 Years in Japan
Oh, you would?
by Daniel
Yeah,
Wallace.
yeah, okay.
Because when I came to that, I thought, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. That was
I'll
interesting. Yeah, I don't know if it's a story, but maybe over some sake we can talk about it sometime.
Maybe it's a magazine article.
Yeah.
Well, we're out of time. Now, of course.
Of course, it always happens that way.
Always are. Well, good luck with this. Good luck tonight. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'll see you as often as I can.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.